Good evening. Welcome to the Plot Dickens Presents A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a live online reading in 3 parts. The Plot Dickens readers are John Boaz, Jennifer Abundez, Chandra Howard, Nikki Kalmus, Claire Krieger Boaz, Amber Largent, Joe Partinsky, and Randy Thomas. And now, on to tonight's reading. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits, and Stave 5, The End of It. Both staves will be presented continuously, without interruption or intermission.
The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached.
When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery.
It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand.
But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded.
He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread.
He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us? Is that so, spirit?
The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received.
Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it.
The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own hand to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black.
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on, lead on. The night is waning fast, and time is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit.
The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were in the heart of it, on change amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often.
The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
God knows.
Oh, what has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer?
I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one.
Well, I am the most disinterested among you after all, for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided onto a street. Its finger pointed to 2 persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here. He knew these men also, perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point of always standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view.
How are you?
How are you?
Well, old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?
So I am told.
Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose.
No. Something else to think of. Good morning.
Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial, but feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was the future. Nor could he think of any one immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed and would render the solution of these riddles easy.
He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner. And though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this.
Quiet and dark beside him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand and its situation in reference to himself that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold.
They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery.
Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop below a penthouse roof where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor within were piles of heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frowsy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement.
Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh.
Let the charwoman alone to be the first. Let the laundress alone to be the second. Let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance if we haven't all three met here without meaning it.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlour. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Oh, how it squeaks. There ain't such a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe, and I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. We're all suitable to our calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlour. Come into the parlour.
The parlor was the space behind the screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with the bold defiance at the other two.
What odds, then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did.
That's true indeed, no man more so.
Why, then, don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose.
No, indeed, we should hope not.
Very well, then. That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
No, indeed.
If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have somebody to look after him when he was struck with death instead of lying gasping out his last there alone by himself.
It's the truest word that ever was spoke. It's a judgment on him.
I wish it was a little heavier judgment, and it should have been, you may depend upon it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We knew pretty well what we were helping ourselves to before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe.
But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall and added them up into a total, where he found there was nothing more to come.
That's your account, and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?
Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner.
I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown.
And now undo my bundle, Joe.
Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff.
What you call this? Bed curtains?
Bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching it out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now.
His blankets?
Who else's, do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of nothing catching, eh?
Don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't have been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one.
Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. As they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp, he viewed them with a detestation and disgust, which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. Old Joe produced a flannel bag with money in it, and told out their several gains upon the ground.
Ha ha! This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead. Ha ha ha!
Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language.
The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced round in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced toward the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side.
Scrooge thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealing, griping cares? They have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house with not a man, a woman, or a child to say he was kind to me in this or that, and for the memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge dare think not.
Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, let us go.
Still, the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head.
I understand you, and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power. If there is any person in this town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show me that person, Spirit. I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it revealed a room by daylight where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried but in vain to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play.
At length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until after a long silence, he appeared embarrassed how to answer.
Is it good or bad?
Bad.
We are quite ruined.
No, there is hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened.
He is past relenting. He is dead.
She was a mild and patient creature if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart.
What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure.
Let me see some tenderness connected with the death, or that dark chamber, Spirit, which we left just now, will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them.
The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face.
The color hurts my eyes. They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home, for the world. It must be near his time.
Past it, rather, but I think he has walked a little slower than he used to these last few evenings, Mother.
I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed.
And so have I, often.
But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so, and it was no trouble. And there is your father at the door.
She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob and his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him most to it. Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said.
Sunday? You went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often, I promised him. I promised Tiny Tim that I would walk there on a Sunday.
He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again, quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once.
He is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you have ever heard. I told him, I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Everybody knows that.
Very well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way, that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be surer of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation.
Only hear that, Peter.
It's just as likely as not. And one of these days Peter will set out on his own. But there's plenty of time for that. However and whenever we are apart from one another, I'm sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, or this first parting that there was among us.
Mrs. Cratchit kissed him. His daughters kissed him. The two young Cratchits kissed him. And Peter and himself shook hands.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment.
This court, through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come.
The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere.
The house is yonder. Why do you point away?
The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before.
He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look round before entering.
A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man, whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life. Choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite, a worthy place.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw a new meaning in its solemn shape.
Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only?
Still, the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood.
Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if preserved in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me.
The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Am I that man who lay upon the bed?
The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again.
No, spirit. Oh, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good spirit, assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirit of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing that's on this stone.
In his agony, he caught the spectral hand.
It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it.
The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him.
Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress.
It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
Yes, and the bedpost was his own.
The bed was his own.
The room was his own.
Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees.
He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. Scrooge folded one of his bed curtains in his arms.
They are not torn down. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world.
He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. Then Scrooge started off again, going round the fireplace.
There's the saucepan that the gruel was in. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened.
Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs.
I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby.
He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell. Bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Glorious, glorious.
Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist. Clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold. Cold piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Scrooge called downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him.
What's today?
What's that, sir?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day? I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the poulterers in the next street, but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love it as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. With an honest expression it has on its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello, how are you? Merry Christmas.
It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped him off short in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax.
Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried.
Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut the end off his nose, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied.
He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir, and Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears.
He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting house the day before and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it.
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I feared may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness?
Here, Scrooge whispered in his ear.
Lord bless me, my dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say to such munificence.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Thank ye. I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro and patted children on the head and questioned beggars and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please.
Thank ye. He knows me. I'll go in here, my dear.
He turned toward the dining room and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in a great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points and like to see that everything is right.
Fred!
Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started! Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account.
Why, bless my soul, who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in. It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did all the guests when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness.
But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. A quarter past. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half into his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore I am to raise your salary.
Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him, and calling to the people in the court for help and a straitjacket.
A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more.
And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father.
He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as a good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world.
Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him.
He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards.
And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge.
May that be truly said of us and all of us.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
Hey, oh my! This concludes the third and final night of the Plot Dickens live online reading of Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Thank you so much for joining us. You have just heard Staves 4 and 5. This is our final reading for the year, and on behalf of myself and all the Plot Dickens readers, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for listening. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the Plot Dickens readers for lending their time, their industry, and their immense talent to this project. It means the world to me that they made this happen. Thank you all so very much. The Plot Dickens, we're going to be online for the next few minutes to chat and celebrate the conclusion of this wonderful project. Our chat is going to be hosted by the wonderful Corey Bryn. But ladies and gentlemen, listeners at home, if you must go, please allow us to say good night, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and of course, God bless us, everyone. And if you're still with us and you're going to stay with us, thank you so much. Let me introduce to you a wonderful gent and a friend of the Plot Dickens, Corey Bryn, ladies and gentlemen.
Bravo!
Corey's going to guide our discussion. We're going to take questions from audience comments posted to both Facebook and YouTube. Corey's going to have some questions of his own, I think. Please feel free to join in the conversation. And whenever you're ready, Corey, take it away.
Yes, thank you. And I hope everyone who's watching will join me in giving a virtual round of applause to these awesome players. It was joyous to watch and listen, and I'm just very thrilled that you asked me to be a part. So to start, the mad scientist, Mr. John Boaz.
Hey.
what called you to put on and organize this wonderful production?
A couple of different things, actually. Thank you for the question. Very happy to be here online with all of you fantastic people. The pandemic, for one thing, there's this terrible pandemic, and growing up as a kid at Christmas time, I always loved hearing my grandfather would play. He had a cassette of the Mercury Theater's 1939 broadcast of A Christmas Carol. And we listened to it every Christmas, and I thought about, wouldn't it be wonderful to bring a similar experience, but of course in the modern day internet world, like not exactly a radio play and not exactly an audiobook, but just people coming together to do a live reading of this wonderful timeless story that I love so much. So really it was to serve my own personal interest, and I'm so glad that everybody said yes. And I hoped that other people would want to tune in and gather together around the modern version of the radio, which is their laptop, and listen in. And I'm so glad that everybody said yes. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And for anyone really who took part in this marvelous production, what were some of the unique challenges and opportunities to trying to put together something online like this while we are socially distanced?
I'll jump in as the tech behind the scenes. We started out on Zoom, and then
just very quickly, a round of applause for Claire and the tech. I mean,
bravo!
So amazing.
And so I learned a lot, which was really fun. So we are using StreamYard, which is another streaming platform that I had to learn for my job. And I thought it would be fun to add all of these layers and stressors to doing a live reading. So when you see me turning my head, I'm doing different things. I'm putting up comments, switching, turning on and off videos and all of that. And I made all of those videos and cards in Canva, and so for me it was challenging but also really, really fun, and I was so happy to get us off of Zoom and into StreamYard to add a little bit of a different flair and some dynamics that aren't available in Zoom. So hopefully it wasn't as taxing, because I know a lot of us are on Zoom all day for our jobs, and so just the little pieces of flair, if you will, along with the incredible costuming for those of you that tuned in for all 3 times. The ghosts had amazing costumes, and everybody really put their all into it. So I would say it was a wonderful and fun opportunity for me to work on the tech part. And everybody's just so wonderful and fun to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about from the actor's perspective?
Actors?
I was also an actor, and so that doubles. I was doubling as tech and an actor, you see. So.
I guess I can add a little snippet of related to that. I think it was really cool to kind of revisit the language in this story, like having not read it for a very long time. And just there's some, John is like the mad scientist, as you called him. He's just so passionate and knowledgeable about it. It was really fun to really find new ways of pronouncing things and really diving into the dialogue quite a bit and having fun leaning into the characters. It was a real treat and something that I didn't think would shine through as much on a virtual reading as it did. It was really fun to see everyone go big, especially Randy in this last stave. Oh, my heart.
God, heart explosion. So yeah, absolutely. It's always a challenge, of course, to perform on, dude.
Thanks, Mom.
I mean, it's tough not being in the room. As actors, it's so great to be able to, be in the same room with each other, and and with the audience, there's a vibe that happens in live theater where we feed off, each other. We can see what's happening and adjust in the moment, and this is different, but still you can feel, when Randy is Scrooge and he's putting out that Scrooge energy, you can feel it, when everybody comes forth with all of their wonderful stuff, you can still pick it up and run with it. And we hope that we can give just the smallest amount across the tubes of the internet that we all, are clearly feeling in our hearts. Yeah.
Awesome. So I see, I was going to ask this too, but I see our very own Professor Malone asked a very similar question in the comments. With the language being, more old timey and having there be so much prose, how did you go about trimming it down and editing it together so that it came across so well on the?
John?
In our initial, we had a few rehearsals. We've been doing this we've been reading this book since September. Yeah.
And also just a note, Cuban and Malone, we're not on Zoom, we're on StreamYard. Continue.
We have a sponsorship with StreamYard.
Yeah, we got to make that sponsor money.
So how do we do it? Well, we started off by just reading the book itself aloud. I tried to break it up to give everybody sections to read, and then we figured out like what worked and what didn't work. My initial thought was that it was going to be just a straight reading of the book, and that we'd select a couple of narrators per stave chapter, and that we'd bounce back and forth a lot. And then as it went along, it became clear, okay, there are some sections of this book that don't really translate well either to a modern audience. There are, this is not an unabridged version. I made just a few minor cuts here and there where the narrator gets a little bit too jokey, where it's clearly like, if you were in Victorian England hearing this joke, it would be a real knee slapper. You would, but they didn't necessarily work. We tried to pare down all that extraneous language, that tangential language, to make it go more toward, if it's not serving the immediate story, we're probably going to trim it. Although we did leave in some things, in the descriptions of the settings where, it became clear that the extra description of the Christmas day, the Christmas present setting, added to the joy that was trying to be communicated about being out on the day itself. We kept those things in. So, and then eventually we just figured out, it gives it more forward energy if we break up the narrator parts. So eventually I sat down and said, all right, we're all going to narrate. We had already decided, we already knew that we were all going to narrate in various bits, but I broke it up even further so that we would be flipping back and forth the narrators more frequently. It adds energy to it that you can't, if we were live, you would feel the energy of everybody reading at the same time. But because we're in this format, it helps to switch up the readers more frequently. Yeah, it was a long and fun process. I really enjoyed putting this together, and I hope everybody else enjoyed figuring everything out as we went. You guys all did so good.
Here. So I'm going to combine Julie's and Vicky's questions into one bigger question. How are the costumes handled and decided upon, and who already had their hats in their wardrobes?
I believe all of the top hats were purchased for this purpose. I was the first one to go out and buy my top hat. So I think I inspired everyone. I'd like to say I'm a trendsetter. I bet each person, to answer the question, was responsible for their own costumes. And I think for those of us who played multiple characters, it was fun to kind of have like, all right, here's a different hat for this, to kind of get you into character a little bit.
I will add to that we kind of like started with just hats, and then slowly over time someone would add something, which would then inspire someone else to add something, and it just kind of snowballed from there, because I think it added to the magic, or we all loved it.
I will say I did not purchase my hat. It was in the home. It was not mine. I stole it from my roommate.
But you did bring the robe to the character.
I did bring the robe to the character. Yes. Sleepy Time Scrooge robe. Yes.
I'm just a little sad here that Scrooge had to steal on Christmas to get his hat. Has he learned? So I wanted to ask this question to both Nikki and Chandra. You both played a ton of like the townspeople and like the supporting characters. What was it like to quickly switch between some of them in some cases, but also to like breathe the life into like the world of the story?
Well, the quick switching, we did tech rehearsals a lot, and we would write notes into our scripts, and mine literally say, take off big hat and put on little hat, and take off scarf and put on this. So it's just these really quick reminders. And it was always fun to think of who you were playing with. And that whenever I was playing with Nikki, I was always going to be we were going to be very bustly and like hustly and bustly. And it was just fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. A lot of notes in the script. I like italicized or bolded different things to like help me remember how I wanted to speak. And then we also kind of did a lot of talking with John about like the like power that your character may have, or their status in society. Are they wealthy or are they poor? And kind of help with the accents to help fill out the town.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I want to shift over to Amber very quickly. Taking on the role of the ghost of Jacob Marley.
Jacob Marley.
Yes, it's wonderfully done. How was it to kind of take on the first of the supernatural entities and kind of be the portent of what's to come in this production?
It was really fun. It's Jacob Marley is fun because he's like in the spirit realm, but he's like a real person that like lived a human life. So I thought it was a really fun role. I mean, I saw in the comments there, someone had asked, like, did we like choose who did it best? And it was just kind of random that things got divvied out in some ways. And I was super duper pleased when I saw that I was cast as Jacob Marley. And it was like, oh, this is something I can like sink my teeth into a little bit. But yeah, it was fun just because it's like, I know John had sort of a little bit of guidance in saying that like this is weird for Jacob Marley, like he doesn't know why this is the time that he's finally appearing to Scrooge. So you get to play with that, and then just sort of the heartache of someone who has who's like living through this hell kind of and suffering, but still wanting to make things a little better for Scrooge. So yeah, it was a really fun role. The hardest part was trying to get some chain sounds going, but I had bought this little chain, but it just did not like I was like, this little chain will sound really clinky, but it didn't. So next year I'm gonna up the chain game next year.
Perfect. And keeping on the theme of people kind of living in misery, in terms of the character they're playing, I want to turn to Jen, who played the Ghost of Christmas Past, also very wonderfully. So although the story in the end has a much uplifting conclusion, the Ghost of Christmas Past sort of has to be the first one to break down Scrooge and show him a lot of pain. So when working with Randy, like what was it like to like be that character who had to kind of set the tone in that regards as well?
Well, working with Randy's super easy for me. I think it was just I had a little bit of trouble figuring out how I wanted to portray the ghost because it's almost childlike. It's very otherworldly. So I had to kind of like think about it. And every time I read it, I was reading it a little bit differently. And something just kind of clicked on our tech rehearsal before. I was like, oh, I like this because it's not too serious, but there's also like this wistfulness and, have to kind of you're starting that reminder with Scrooge of, look, this is how you were. This is what was there then. So it was really, really fun to play off of him and his meanness.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think like Randy had to say "Good day, sir" about 10 times in a row in the first stage. So.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
So to keep on moving forward with the ghost, average size Tim.
Yes.
As I noticed, as the ghost of both Christmas Present and Fred, those are both very upbeat and optimistic characters in their own right. So, like, how did you keep that spirit alive in both characters, but try to find ways to differentiate?
I think with Fred, that was fun to just be this really like innocent, kind-hearted gentleman, and we would laugh at like me saying "Uncle" every time we read through it, and just being like this really like whimsical, innocent character that was fun to play around with that kind of higher voice, that like polite voice, and then the Ghost of Christmas Present was just. Just a whole ball of sass for me, and just I would just try and wear something more ridiculous in our rehearsals to surprise Randy every time I showed up, and it was just it's so fun to to lean into a character that's just like kind of a gives a little bit of sass to Scrooge with using his own words against him, and he's very like, his retorts are very fun. So yeah, I just leaned into this big jolly, the way he's described in the story. He's like, all right, you can have fun being really, really big with this insane ghost. So yeah, I had a great time with both of them.
Awesome. I'll turn it over to one Mr. Randy, who the comments are kudosing, very deservingly so, I believe. So Scrooge, what was it like? Have you ever played Scrooge before?
No. And it took some doing to get me to do it. I think, I needed a little encouragement, I think, personally, and I'm in the right group for that because everyone was nothing but encouraging the whole time. It's a group of people that are awesome and will just give you exactly what you need. So I know I hadn't played him before, but I'm glad I did it. It's a good time. He kind of has to, because obviously he has to take this big leap from the start to the end of it. And it's kind of a weird thing because like as the ghosts come, obviously this is this huge thing in this guy's life, and it's like, oh, you can see he's making progress, and even the way he talks as it goes throughout, it's like, all right, I can see progress, and you can see him having these realizations as he goes, but it doesn't quite feel like it. It seems like if he had gotten through maybe part of this or the first two, like maybe he goes back to his life and maybe he tries to do this for a little bit, but then probably ends up in the same place. But that last ghost that comes, the one who is just so ominous, doesn't say anything to him, though. All the events it shows him, that's when the true change occurs. And then, you realize it's set in stone. But it was a blast and a joy with these people because every single character that you get to interact with is so much fun. And even when you're not, and you're just listening to the conversations and trying not to laugh at the wonderful, wonderful things that are going on, and trying not to smile at them a lot because everybody's performances are so good. It was really fun.
Awesome. Well said.
I just want to loop in very quickly and say that when we initially did the reading of the book, we rotated every stave, to see, just to get a feel for the words and, see how different people had handled different characters. And when it came to like, after I had broken up I'd done my little edits and I broke up the narrators and stuff, I kept coming back to, and somebody planted this idea in my head, somebody here, I can't remember who it is. I might was it Chandra? I don't want to misappropriate the idea, but somebody threw out the idea of like Scrooge remaining the same throughout, and I was like, I just kept coming back to Randy. Like his voice just, his voice became Scrooge's voice in my brain, and like when I proposed it, I was like, now Randy, and Randy was a little hesitant at first, and I actually have a completely different cast list set aside, the discarded cast list where Scrooge would rotate every stave, but I was just like, let's just go forward and try it with Randy as Scrooge and see what happens. And then, we never went back. Randy had it. It was great.
Excellent. So Claire, I know you already talked a little bit about what you had to do on the technical side, but just how did it feel like to switch from actor to tech producer so flawlessly? I think from our side it looked great, and but just like how do you switch your brain so quickly? How'd you wrap your mind around all that?
I rehearsed a lot. We rehearsed a lot. We did tech every night after we do a reading. We would do a little debrief and celebration, and then the next Monday we would get back to work. I would spend a lot of time over the weekend before the reading. John and I would rehearse just the words, not the tech, and then I would revisit the tech. The hardest, the character that was like the hardest for me and that meant the most to me was Belle in was it Stave 2, John, or 3? 3. I couldn't access her in the way that felt right, and so when I read the words of this young love and this woman who loved this man so deeply, who was giving up basically turning to the dark side of worshiping money over love, it made me angry. And so every time we would do it in rehearsal, I came at it and from a very angry place. And John kept asking these, we would rehearse and he would say, how do you feel when you read these words? And I'd say, mad, angry. And then he wasn't telling me that she's sad, but he was like, okay, that's your take. Anyway, so I watched a bunch of different versions on YouTube of the scene between Belle and young Scrooge, and found this one that was very quiet and sad. And I was like, that's what he's going for. Anyway, so that one was the most, I would say, nerve-wracking in the switch, because I'd come to care for her so much and I wanted to try to do her justice. And I don't even know if I did, but it was, that was the most difficult switching, was between Belle and then Tuck. Because there was so much emotion going on in that character. And then the rest of them, it wasn't as challenging, because most of the other characters were, like Mrs. Cratchit was just a blast. She was so fun. And the gentleman and all that stuff, and the narration. So really it was just during Belle. That was hard. And the way I did it was practice.
And you killed it. You nailed it.
Oh, thank you.
Very much so.
As young Scrooge, I concur.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you ever so much.
Beautiful. So I saw that there's a question, I think from Dan, who was also being featured on the screen at the moment. But he had asked, perhaps if the Christmas spirits are kind, next year we'll all be able to actually be together in the real world. Yes. Do you see this perhaps taking other forms, perhaps non-online, in the future?
I don't want to speak for the group, because they, I don't know that I get to. I hope they'll have us every year. I hope that we get to do this again. Live in person would be wonderful. Some version of it. It might have to, change. It might have to change live. I mean, something that I loved about this was that we could break it up over several nights, and that it was a genuine reading as opposed to a performance. But I would love for this to live on somehow, even if we do like a live version, if we're all, in a place where we can actually be live and in person next Christmas, hopefully. I would love to do that kind of version, but I would also love to do, if possible, this again and bring it to people who can't be with us, in person. I also love the multiple night thing of this. It gives, something to look forward to each week. And I love the lead up into the Christmas week itself. It's a great transition between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I feel like we're really sending everybody who tuned in. I hope we're sending you off into this week with like a renewed joy and, happiness that, yeah, we're here. We're all together, even if we can't be together, we're all in this. Yeah.
And I'm already off book, so I'm down for either one next year, John. So yeah.
Sweet. Let's do it.
Kind of in the same vein, I saw Julie asked a little earlier, is there anything next? Anything else in the pipeline for the Plot Dickens players, Dickens or otherwise?
Well, I don't want to give anything away. I mean,
perhaps.
Okay, I can ask another question.
Perhaps there's something coming up next. I wouldn't, I wouldn't look away for very long. You never know what's going to pop up on your screen from one day to the next. Yes, we're hoping to do something else. I don't know what it is yet, or do I? Tune in.
See.
Corey, can we answer this question? Oh wait, not that one. Dang it, this one.
Is it? Yeah, I was gonna get there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Randy's mute button is my answer.
My mute button too.
And John.
I mean, I feel like if there was a problem child of this cast, it was this guy. Because I mean, I made the demands of everyone all the time, and everybody who's ever worked with me knows that I'm a grueling taskmaster. So,
well, and then there's every time that Joe we'd introduce the Dickens players, and Joe would be like,
yep, never mind, it's Joe.
I mean, average.
Good afternoon.
So there was I'm going to just tell everybody, I don't care. There was a reading where he was the ghost of Christmas Present and his camera was off. And then he turns his camera on, and for a wig, he's wearing a sweatshirt on his head. And it was very funny. We broke. But it also worked somehow, which is also enraging because he was joking around and yet it also worked.
Those Ghost of Christmas Present fits, all of them.
Yeah.
So good.
He's a style icon.
That's awesome. Julie also asked, for everyone who wants to shout out their answer, who your favorite character is, whether you played them or otherwise from the story.
Mine is Jacob Marley, just because of what Amber did with it. It was always really just like blew me away from the beginning of hearing it into what it turned into. So everyone was amazing, but that's the one that I keep going back to in my head is like just the most like beautifully executed. So it made me love the character even more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll say like it's hard to choose because you wanna like as people go, it's so exciting. Like John's character today was just like, who doesn't love that? With the charwoman of Amber's charwoman. But the thing is, like, everyone had all these emotional levels, and I was always near tears, like during Jen's Bob Cratchit. There were certain elements that were just like hilarious, and then some people or some characters that were just so moving.
Yeah, definitely. If you ever want to bring a poignant humanity to your characters, just get Jenna Bundas involved, for sure. We've already discussed Claire's journey with Belle, but it was amazing. You all got to see the finished product, but we all got to see how Claire worked that over time. Very impressive, and very selfishly, I mean, old Joe doesn't often appear in adaptations of A Christmas Carol, but when we were reading him and I had assigned myself old Joe, I was just like, well, we'll see how this goes. And when I did, I was like, okay, well, this is, I hope you like him, because if we ever do this again, bad news, I'm old Joe. I love being that guy.
I think, gentlemen,
you were born to be that.
The unsung heroes of this are gentlemen number 1 and number 2.
Or is that?
Yeah. That was one of the funnest scenes with Nikki in the beginning, in the very first stave, with the back and forth being the gentleman.
Old
I enjoyed that.
You gotta love old.
Oh my god, that was amazing.
I really loved Fred. Just the optimism that Joe brought to him, and like just this, like, oh man, I get like pure joy from hearing that character. And obviously he's such a contrast to Scrooge. So it's like
I thought you were gonna say contrast to me as a person.
So I loved Fred, and I also, we already talked about, but old Joe. Every time I hear John's accent for old Joe,
so good.
It's so good.
Coming to the party. Coming to the party.
I will say specifically tonight, Nikki and Chandra's businessman.
So great.
when they came on screen, you guys, I don't know if like how much y'all were doing it on purpose, but as soon as you took up your businessman postures and you were making like little micro expressions before you even talked, that was very, very funny to me. I like that a lot.
There are no small roles. Just kidding.
I mean, absolutely true. Absolutely true. You guys, oh man, you made my nights, for the last several weeks. I mean, the only thing more we could share with the audience is if we live streamed our practices, because they're just lovely get-togethers of friends. And I would mention this actually in chat and, on camera with the group. We're a group of friends, and a lot of us have performed together over time. And here we are in this insane time, getting together to read a 19th century novel to each other. It's like we're gathered around a fire, except the glowing fire is our screens. But it was so deliciously wonderful to do it. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I just want to add, like everyone has stated some really wonderful characters. We've talked about all of them. But the thing that my friends from home, shout out to Fairport, New York, and I laugh about are the doorbells, because it was my first role. Again, no small parts, right? We all like worked together to create, hopefully, what felt very real. So, doorbell, my favorite.
Doorbell.
Love it.
I liked everyone's narrator. Because from the beginning, I think all of us were just reading as you would a novel to yourself and seeing how everyone like progressed and brought life to it. I think it was really fun to see everyone's narration.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Wonderful. So I think we're getting a little close to time here. So maybe I'd like to wrap up with kind of drawing on what John had just said in his last statement about how it meant to him, and just curious if we want to popcorn around the group, like what, especially this year in 2020, like what do we all feel that this story we could draw from the story, or the messages we could take and carry forth, especially this year?
I'll start. For me personally, this year obviously it's been rough, and I honestly did not want to do anything over Zoom. To me, performance has always been about the other people. But when John asked if I would do it, I was like, yes, I love doing everything you like to do. So for me, what I take from this is really friendship and being able to see each other. And I mentioned it to the cast. It was so exciting for the first night to get ready as if I was going to a performance and brush my hair a certain way. And so that for me is just that friendship and camaraderie is super important.
I'll go just as the outside person. So I'm from Sacramento and I'm new to improv. I work at the Sacramento Comedy Spot up in Sac. But I'm very old friends with Claire and John. And I've seen all of these people perform at Finest City for years and years. And I was really intimidated to come into the group. And I felt very welcomed. And so it was this weird opportunity where the distance didn't matter. And I lucked out to work with you all. And so that was sort of a moving realization that if it weren't the year it is, I wouldn't have gotten to do this with you all.
I want to say two things, and they're both related to the actual story and the fact that we're doing this, is that, it talks a lot about the thing that is really going to be Scrooge's undoing is the fact that he's pushed everyone away, that he's had this, yes, he's a horrible, wretched miser and he's very self-involved, but ultimately, when he's dead, there's a section that my narrator reads where he's saying, if there were, there's no one there to give him a kind word. There's no one around to say, you did this or that for me, and I miss you, and I'm going to miss you. And all the, the people who are picking apart all of the things from Scrooge that they've stolen, they're like, if you had been, if he had been natural in his lifetime, and if he had done anything nice for anybody, there would be people to miss him. And I think that human connection, that is so deeply, deeply important. And I'm so glad that we were able to come together and do this for one another. And then the second, and for all of you, hopefully you all enjoy, whoever's watching the live stream still. And then also there's a notion of, Christmas is basically, it's a time for being not only together, and if we can't be together, it's a time for giving and reaching out and being charitable and kind and thinking of other people, not just yourself. It's also about thinking about other people. And, the more we can emphasize that for one another and for other people out there, and we can live it and experience it, then, I take that away from this, that we want to do this not just for ourselves, but for other people. And hopefully this message carries out there, out on the digital airwaves. Yeah.
Well, to quote Jacob Marley, and one of the lines that sticks with me is that mankind was my business. And so to take that little shorthand and apply it every day of the year, and especially in this pandemic, when, for those people who have the means to help others in need and to just do your part for mankind by wearing a mask and staying your 6 feet apart and, taking care of each other by taking care of yourself. And so year round. We'll take Scrooge with us all year round.
Oh yeah.
It was a very sentimental. It's a very sentimental story and experience, and specifically, it was fun to watch. John has such a deep connection to the story through his grandfather and listening to the 1939 radio production. And so for me, I had this interesting dual experience of John just like living the dream of performing this with a group of people that were as dedicated and came to love it and be as passionate about the project as he was. But also I've seen A Christmas Carol, many versions of it over the years, and all the things that you're supposed to feel, I felt. But in the reading of it, something, because I kept thinking about the sentimentality, and really sentimentality can be pretty empty if there's no action behind it. And so I love this idea of Scrooge is visiting all of these past, present, and potentially future scenes, and he's feeling all of these things, and he has so much sentimentality about Belle and Fezziwig and Jacob Marley and all of that. And it wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't, the switch hadn't gone off for him, and it does, and it goes off, and he literally decides a new way forward in his life. And I never noticed that as I guess intensely as I did until we read it together. And John and I would have conversations. I'd say, why did he do this? And why did he say that? And, why wouldn't he? And anyway, we would have these discussions about it. And it really I think the text brings something out that is glossed over or missed a little through sometimes comedic characterization of that switch flipping when it's really profound. And Randy, you gave it that. You made us see and feel that switch. So bravo, dude.
Bravo. The one thing I guess I would add, we've covered my sentiments about the story and what it means to bring it to life. But I really like the way John pitched this initially, was about how families would get together and listen to that radio production, and like it felt very Christmassy to do that, to sit around a fire and listen to something together and kind of veer off in your imagination, seeing the story come to life. So I thought it was cool to be able to do that. A lot of my family and friends tuned in from the East Coast and have said my mom says, great job, John. I think it's really cool and felt very Christmassy to like have people get a little, hour and a half escape or hour long escape from the reality of this year and just dive into this story with us every Sunday for the last 3 weeks. So that's been really cool to be a part of. So.
Yeah, really tough to rep this one out. Everyone's already said such loving, genuine things that I fully agree with. I will add it, like my parents and some of my childhood best friends live in New York, or on the East Coast, 3,000 miles away. And so a lot of them have been able to tune in, which is really cool. It makes me feel more connected to them. They don't get to see me perform very often. So that's really, really nice. And yeah, when John pitched this, he mentioned kind of the spirit of Christmas. And hopefully that's what we brought. It certainly brought me a lot of joy and spirit in a year when it's been pretty tough to find the spirit or joy. So yeah, it's just been wonderful to share with all of you and with all the people that have watched. And I will add, my dad played Scrooge once, and he's told me about that, and it just felt really cool to be a part of something that he's done in the past.
You're only telling us this now?
Yeah, what? I didn't know that.
Saved it till the end.
I think, as everybody has said, it's been a tough year. It's been real tough. And sometimes Christmas, unfortunately, and holidays can kind of make that worse for some people sometimes. But I hope this is something that has made some people feel a lot better. I know for me personally, it's been great. John was saying earlier how you're reading that one passage where Scrooge had no one to, tell him these things and assure him around him. And I literally just went through something where that's all I got is people reassuring me and good encouragement and good spirit around me. So for me personally, it's been such a great thing to realize, and while I'm playing this character, to look around at the same time and realize I have this that he doesn't have from these people and from everyone. So it's been a joy. It's been awesome. I'm so glad he asked all of us to do this, and I hope the audience got as much joy out of it as we did.
Yeah.
Here,
Awesome.
here.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, Corey, for agreeing to
Hey,
host this
thank
Q&A.
Thank you for letting me be a part. And
Thank
I think
you, Corey.
I don't want to. I hope everyone who has watched will allow me to speak for them. And also Dan's most recent comment about, thank you for, if you've been working on this since September, thank you for putting that much effort in to bring us this wonderful Christmas tree, and hope to see what you guys have in the future.
Good afternoon.
Oh, is that it?
Good
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
One by one, we shall turn our cameras off.
Good afternoon.
God bless us.
Bye.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Bye.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Oh, sorry, I'm back. Well, good afternoon. One more for good measure. Okay. Good afternoon. Good day.
Good afternoon.